My name is Olivia Bennett. I am 33 years old. The night before Christmas last year, my uncle stood in the middle of a living room packed with relatives, looked me straight in the eye, and said that some people are born to lead a family, while others are born only to spend other people's money. The entire room burst into laughter. At the time, I had no idea that just a few weeks later, that same man would lose everything he had spent more than 20 years trying to protect. But that story began on a rainy day in Asheville, the day Eleanor Bennett died. That morning, the North Carolina sky was covered in a heavy blanket of gray clouds. Raindrops slid quietly down the windows of the small bookstore where Olivia worked. The bookstore sat on a quiet corner near downtown. It was not luxurious, it was not famous, just an old shop filled with the scent of aged paper, pine wood, and freshly roasted coffee. That place was her entire world. Her phone vibrated while Olivia was arranging novels on a shelf. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. The moment she heard the choked breath on the other end of the line, Olivia knew something was wrong. Her mother spoke softly. "Grandma is gone." Everything around her seemed to slow down. The sound of the rain, the ticking wall clock, even her own breathing. Eleanor Bennett passed away early that morning at the city hospital. She had lived for 85 years. A life long enough to watch generations grow up, and long enough to understand exactly who everyone in her family truly was. When Olivia arrived at the hospital, the hallway was already crowded. Her mother sat quietly on a plastic chair beside the room. Her eyes were red and swollen. Richard Bennett stood near the window, a perfectly tailored gray suit, a straight back, a face so calm it seemed cold. He was not crying. No one saw him cry. Not even on the day his mother died. Instead, he was talking on the phone. Words like assets, paperwork, and management authority kept appearing throughout the conversation. Olivia stood several feet away. She looked at the man her entire family respected, and for the first time, she felt that something was wrong. 3 days later, the funeral took place. The church was packed. White floral arrangements lined the aisle. The scent of candles and lilies filled the air. Richard delivered the eulogy. He spoke about tradition. He spoke about honor. He spoke about the responsibilities of the Bennett family. And more than anything else, he spoke about Ethan, his son, the man he called the future of the family. Ethan's name was mentioned again and again, while Olivia was not mentioned at all, not once. Even her mother noticed, but she simply lowered her head, as always. After the service, as people began leaving the church, an older woman walked toward Olivia. She wore a simple black coat. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. Her eyes were calm but sharp. She took Olivia's hand. Her grip was cold but steady. "Your grandmother was very proud of you." Olivia looked surprised. "Who are you?" The woman only smiled. Then she added one more sentence. "Soon, you will know the truth." Before Olivia could ask another question, the woman disappeared into the crowd, gone as if she had never been there. That evening, the Bennett family gathered at the old mansion on the hill. The house had stood there for nearly a century, a place that held almost the entire history of the family. Richard sat at the center of the room. Everyone's attention was fixed on him. After a few polite exchanges, he raised his glass. His voice carried confidence. "My mother left everything in my hands. I will make sure her assets are managed properly, for the people who know how to create value." His eyes settled on Olivia, only for a second, but long enough for everyone to understand exactly who he meant. A few quiet laughs followed. Olivia said nothing. She simply stood up and left the dining room. The bedroom where she had slept as a child looked almost unchanged. The wooden dresser, the white window frame, the old books on the shelves. She sat down on the edge of the bed and accidentally noticed a worn novel resting on the table. It had been Eleanor's favorite book. When she opened it, a cream-colored envelope slipped onto the floor. Olivia's name was written on it in a trembling but familiar hand. Her heart began to race. Inside was a letter, and after only a few lines, the world she had always trusted began to fall apart. Because Eleanor had just revealed a secret that no one in the family wanted Olivia to know, a secret powerful enough to change everything. Olivia barely slept that night. The bedside lamp remained on until well past midnight. Eleanor's letter lay in front of her. Every time she read it again, her heart beat a little faster. Her grandmother had not been mistaken. She had not been confused. She had not left behind emotional promises the way Richard had always implied. Everything had been planned long in advance, and the woman who appeared at the funeral was the key to it all. The next morning, Olivia left the mansion before sunrise. The air was cold. Fog covered the hills surrounding Asheville. She drove into the city. Margaret Shaw's law office was located inside a historic red brick building near the town square. When Olivia walked in, the receptionist seemed to know exactly who she was. Just a few minutes later, she was escorted into a private office. Margaret Shaw was already waiting. The woman looked at Olivia with calm eyes, as if she had been expecting this day for a very long time. Margaret opened a thick file on her desk. Eleanor had been my client for nearly 10 years. Her voice was steady, but every word carried weight. 3 years ago, she instructed me to establish an irrevocable trust. You are the sole beneficiary. Olivia remained silent. Margaret slid a folder across the desk. The numbers inside left her speechless. More than $600,000, in addition to a lakeside property north of Asheville and several other investments. For a few moments, Olivia could not say a word, not because of the money, but because, for the first time in her life, someone had truly believed in her. Believed in her enough to leave behind everything they had spent a lifetime building. Margaret continued. Eleanor expected all of this. She told me Richard would never accept it. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. Then things became even worse. Margaret opened another file. About a month before Eleanor passed away, Richard had already begun filing documents related to controlling the estate. He informed several parties that he would be managing all of Eleanor's assets. That was not legal, but at the time, no one knew the trust even existed. Olivia finally began to understand. Richard had been planning this long before, even while Eleanor was still alive. The meeting ended close to noon, but the story did not end there. 3 days later, something completely unexpected happened. Olivia was organizing books in the store when her phone notified her of a new email. The sender was Ethan Bennett. She was about to delete it, then she realized it was not intended for her. It had been forwarded by mistake, a small error, but enough to destroy an entire family. Olivia's heart raced as she read each line. It was a chain of messages between Ethan and Richard, conversations that had stretched over several weeks. The contents were impossible to believe. They were preparing documents to prove that Olivia was incapable of handling the inheritance. They listed everything. Her old student loans, the income from her bookstore, the fact that she was unmarried, the fact that she did not own a large business. Every detail had been turned into evidence against her. But the line that hurt the most was at the very bottom of the email. Just one short sentence. Ethan had written it. She won't fight back. She never has. Olivia sat frozen. The screen blurred in front of her eyes. Hundreds of memories flooded her mind. The times she had been dismissed. The times people interrupted her while she was speaking. The times her family made decisions for her. For years, they did not just think she was weak, they treated it as an unquestionable fact. That evening, Olivia forwarded every email to Margaret. Less than an hour later, Margaret called. For the first time, there was real concern in her voice. Olivia, I've reviewed additional documents. There's something you need to know. Richard stated in his filings that he had been unable to contact you. Olivia went still. He has your phone number. He has your address. Exactly, Margaret replied. And that's the problem. Because if he intentionally provided false information in order to gain control of the estate, this situation becomes far more serious. The room suddenly felt silent. Olivia looked out the window. Snow had begun falling gently across the rooftops in the distance. For the first time, she was no longer sad. The feeling growing inside her was something else. Clarity. Eleanor had been right. This had never been about money. It was about respect. About spending years being treated as the failure of the family. About people who believed they had the right to determine someone else's worth. Margaret broke the silence. What do you want to do next? Olivia thought for a few seconds, then looked up. Her eyes were calmer than they had ever been. The family is hosting a Christmas gathering in 2 weeks. Margaret nodded. I know. Olivia smiled softly. Then let's let them enjoy it. And for the first time since Eleanor's death, she felt like she was in control. Because while the entire family still believed she was the same weak girl they had always underestimated, none of them knew that the truth had been standing on her side for a very long time. 2 weeks passed quickly. Asheville entered the coldest winter it had seen in years. The distant mountains were covered in shades of silver gray. Stores began hanging Christmas lights. Familiar holiday songs drifted through every street. But beneath that peaceful atmosphere, the Bennett family was preparing for a gathering that no one realized would become the biggest turning point in their history. That year's Christmas celebration was held at the mansion on the hill. The house glowed with warm lights. Pine garlands lined the hallways. A massive Christmas tree stood proudly in the center of the living room. Everything looked perfect, at least on the surface. When Olivia arrived, more than 30 relatives were already there. Laughter filled the house. Some greeted her with a nod. Others glanced her way and quickly looked elsewhere. Nothing had changed, just as it had been for the past 33 years. Olivia removed her coat. She was surprisingly calm. She knew exactly what was waiting for her. Richard stood in the center of the room like the true master of the house. He shook hands, told stories, accepted compliments. No one imagined that within days, the authority he had spent years building would begin to crumble. Ethan was there as well, a dark blue suit, a confident smile, the perfect image of the heir Richard had always wanted. Relatives kept asking about his construction company. Ethan answered with stories about new developments, major contracts, investment opportunities. Everyone listened carefully, while Olivia sat at the far end of the dining table, as she always had, as she had during every family gathering before. When dinner began, Richard stood and raised his glass. The room instantly fell silent. He smiled, a familiar smile. The smile of a man who always believed he was the smartest person in the room. The Bennett family has had an excellent year, he said, and the future looks even brighter. He turned toward Ethan, especially because of people who know how to carry responsibility. Applause filled the room. Ethan nodded in appreciation. One of Olivia's cousins suddenly spoke up. What about Olivia? How is the bookstore doing? Every eye immediately turned toward her. Before Olivia could answer, Richard laughed. The bookstore is doing fine, he said, if selling old books can be called a career. A few laughs echoed around the table. Not loud, but loud enough for everyone to hear, Richard continued. Then again, every family needs someone to follow their passion. Not everyone is born to build an empire. This time the laughter was louder. Ethan smiled too. Only for a second. But Olivia saw it. And he knew she saw it. Across the table, Carol lowered her head slightly. Her hands tightened around her napkin. She did not laugh, but she did not speak either. Olivia once believed those moments no longer hurt, but she realized they still did. Only now the feeling was different. It was no longer pain, no longer embarrassment. It was disappointment. A quiet disappointment. Because she already knew the truth. She knew who was lying, who was betraying her, who was quietly preparing to take what did not belong to them. Dinner continued. People moved on to dessert. Soft Christmas music played in the background. Ethan approached Olivia while she stood alone in the hallway. A glass of wine rested in his hand, his voice lowered. Olivia, I think you should stop. She turned toward him. Stop what? Ethan remained silent for a few seconds, then shrugged. You know exactly what I mean. Some things aren't worth tearing a family apart over. Olivia looked directly into his eyes. For the first time in years, she did not look away. She did not back down. Then she asked a question that left Ethan speechless. Do you know what Grandma actually left behind? The color drained from Ethan's face, only for a moment, but it was enough. He did not answer. He could not, because for the first time, he realized something. Olivia knew far more than the family believed. 10 minutes later, Richard's voice thundered from the living room. Olivia, get in here right now. His voice sounded more like a command than a request. Every conversation stopped immediately. More than 30 people turned to look. Olivia walked into the room. Richard stood in the center. His face was red with anger. He pointed directly at her. "What did you say to Ethan?" The room fell completely silent. Before Olivia could answer, Richard continued. "You're trying to divide this family. You're using your grandmother's death to create problems." Several relatives exchanged uneasy glances. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone could feel the tension. Richard stepped closer. "If you have even a little respect for this family, you should apologize right now." Olivia stood still. He continued. "You've always believed people owe you something, but the truth is, you've never proven your value." His words echoed throughout the room, heavy, cold, cruel. No one stepped in to stop him. Not even her mother, who remained motionless in her chair. Olivia looked at every face, one by one. The people who had watched her grow up, the people who always claimed family was the most important thing in life, yet were willing to sit in silence while she was humiliated. And then, the last thing Richard expected happened. Olivia did not argue. She did not cry. She did not defend herself. She simply smiled. A very small smile. So calm that it confused him. She looked at him for several seconds, then spoke. "All right, just 2 words. Softly spoken, yet enough to silence the entire room. Olivia turned and walked toward the staircase, without looking back, without explaining herself. Without turning around even once, the bedroom door closed behind her. Downstairs, the conversation slowly returned. Richard believed he had won. Ethan believed it too. But sitting alone in the darkness of her room, Olivia pulled out her phone and called Margaret Shaw. When the call connected, she said only one sentence. "Tomorrow morning, bring every original document to the mansion. It's time for everyone to learn the truth." On the other end of the line, Margaret was silent for a moment. Then she replied, "I'll be there." Olivia looked out the window. Snow was still falling. For the last time, she allowed the Bennett family to believe she was the weakest person in that house, because by the next morning, everything would change forever. The next morning, the Bennett mansion woke to a strange silence. Snow covered the front steps in a blanket of white. Thin streams of smoke drifted from the chimney. Everything looked like the perfect Christmas morning. But inside that house, a storm was about to arrive. Richard was the first person downstairs. He wore a perfectly pressed white shirt. His mood seemed much better than it had been the night before. At least he believed he had finally dealt with the problem called Olivia Bennett. When he noticed she had not come down to the kitchen, a faint smile appeared on his face. "Go get Olivia," he told Ethan. A few minutes later, Ethan returned. The room was empty. No one was there. Richard went upstairs himself. He opened the bedroom door. The bed had been neatly made. The closet was empty. Olivia was gone. A look of satisfaction briefly crossed his face. He walked back downstairs, looked around at the relatives gathered in the living room, then made his announcement. Olivia left. A few whispers spread through the room. Richard shrugged. Maybe she realized she was wrong. Maybe she finally understood that some things were beyond her abilities. Ethan laughed. A few relatives laughed with him. None of them realized those would be the last carefree laughs they would share for a very long time. Then the doorbell rang. Carol stood up and opened the door. The entire room immediately fell silent. Margaret Shaw stood outside. A black coat, a leather briefcase in her hand, a calm expression, but eyes that made people uneasy. Richard frowned. "What are you doing here?" Margaret stepped inside. "Without hesitation. I am here to fulfill my legal responsibility," she said. "Regarding the estate of Eleanor Bennett." The atmosphere in the room instantly changed. Richard straightened his posture. "I don't think this is necessary." Margaret looked directly at him. "On the contrary, I think it is absolutely necessary." She placed the briefcase on the table, opened it, then removed several folders and laid them out in front of everyone. The original trust agreement, the notarized certification, the medical records confirming Eleanor Bennett's mental competency. With each document that appeared, Richard's face grew a little paler. Margaret began to read. Her voice was calm, clear, completely without emotion. According to the legally binding wishes of Eleanor Bennett, The sole beneficiary of all assets listed within this trust is Olivia Bennett. The room went completely still. No one spoke, no one moved. Even Ethan stood frozen. Richard let out an uneasy laugh. "That's impossible. My mother would never do that." Margaret did not argue. She simply placed another file on the table. "This is the email correspondence between you and Ethan Bennett." The color immediately drained from Ethan's face. Margaret continued. "The messages include discussions about removing Olivia Bennett from her inheritance rights, as well as false information submitted to various parties." Every eye in the room turned toward Ethan. The man who had always been considered the pride of the family. Now he could not say a single word. Richard tried to respond, but for the first time in his life, he could not find an argument strong enough. Then Margaret removed one final item, a small hard drive. Eleanor Bennett recorded this 6 months before her passing. She said, "I believe everyone should see it." The television screen came to life. Eleanor appeared, older, thinner, but her eyes were still bright. She looked directly into the camera. "If you are watching this recording, then everything has happened exactly as I expected." The room fell silent. Her voice continued, "Olivia is the only person who never wanted anything from me. That is why I chose her. Not because of money, not because of obligation, but because of her character." Tears began forming in Carol's eyes. Several relatives lowered their heads. No one was looking at Richard anymore. The video ended. The silence remained. Heavy, suffocating. Finally, Richard stepped backward, then another step. He looked around the room, but no one stood beside him anymore. There were no admiring looks, no trust, only disappointment, and the truth. 3 days later, Richard was officially removed from all authority over the estate. The transfer process began. The financial problems Ethan had hidden gradually came to light as well. His company lost several business partners. The reputation he had spent years building began to crack. Meanwhile, Olivia did not celebrate. She did not mock anyone. She did not seek revenge. She simply continued living her life. 6 months later, her student loans were completely paid off. The bookstore expanded, and on the lakeside property Eleanor had left behind, a new community library opened. It was called Eleanor House, a place where any child could come and read books for free. One early autumn afternoon, Olivia sat on the porch overlooking the sparkling lake. A letter rested in her hands, a letter her mother had sent several weeks earlier. It contained only one short sentence. "I'm sorry I didn't stand beside you sooner." Olivia read those words for a long time, then folded the letter and placed it beside the letter Eleanor had left her. A gentle breeze moved across the water. Everything was finally peaceful, and for the first time in her life, Olivia understood that the most valuable thing her grandmother had left behind was not money, not land, not property. It was proof that a person's worth should never be determined by those who constantly underestimate them. Sometimes, the greatest gift is not what we receive. It is the truth that finally shows us what we were worthy of all along. Sometimes the people who underestimate you become the very reason you discover your true strength. Olivia's story reminds us that respect, trust, and love can never be measured by money or status. In the end, the truth always finds its way to the surface. What would you have done if you were in Olivia's position? Would you have forgiven your family or walked away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy family drama stories, hidden family truths, and karma revenge stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story.